A billionaire who saw a homeless girl refuse to beg shocked everyone with what he did next. Walking through the forgotten corners of the city, Maxwell Reid witnessed something that stopped him in his tracks. A teenage girl living on the streets who, despite her desperate circumstances, refused to beg for money. While others around her pleaded for spare change, she sat quietly, her pride intact even as hunger gnawed at her. What possessed this girl to choose dignity over survival? And what would drive one of the world's wealthiest men to risk everything for a stranger who wanted nothing from him? Maxwell Reid wasn't supposed to be in this part of town. The billionaire tech mogul had taken a wrong turn after a meeting, his driver stuck in traffic across the city. As he walked past crumbling buildings and desperate faces, something caught his eye that didn't belong in this tableau of urban decay. A girl, no older than 17, sat on a tattered blanket against a brick wall. But unlike the others around her with outstretched hands and pleading eyes, she simply sat with quiet dignity, a small collection of handmade bracelets arranged before her. When a passerby offered her money without taking a bracelet, Maxwell watched in disbelief as she gently refused. "I don't accept handouts," she said softly, "but I'd be happy to sell you something I've made." The businessman in Maxwell was stunned. In a world where everyone wanted something from him, here was someone with nothing who refused what was freely offered. He felt a strange tightness in his chest as he observed her thin frame, the careful way she arranged her few possessions, the quiet determination in her eyes. What Maxwell saw in her eyes would haunt him for days to come. For 3 days, Maxwell couldn't shake the image of the girl from his mind. Her refusal to beg had disrupted something in his carefully ordered worldview. On the 4th day, he returned to the same street corner, half expecting her to be gone. But there she was, in nearly the same spot, this time with a small collection of intricately woven friendship bracelets laid out on her blanket. Maxwell approached, designer shoes stopping just at the edge of her weathered blanket. "How much?" he asked, pointing to a simple blue and white bracelet. "$5, she replied, her voice steady as she looked up at him without a hint of desperation. Maxwell reached into his wallet and pulled out a crisp $100 bill. "I'll take that one." The girl, who he would later learn was named Eliza, carefully picked up the bracelet and held it out to him. But when he tried to hand her the 100, she shook her head. "That's $95 too much," she said. "I don't have change." "Keep it," Maxwell insisted. "Consider it a tip." Something flashed in her eyes. Not gratitude, but something that looked remarkably like offense. "I'm selling bracelets, not begging," she said firmly, still holding out just the one bracelet. "I'll take exactly what I've earned, nothing more." Maxwell stood frozen, the $100 bill suspended between them. In his world, everyone had a price. Everyone could be bought. Everyone wanted more than they deserved. But this homeless girl was refusing money she desperately needed because she hadn't earned it. "Why?" he finally asked. Eliza looked up at him, her eyes clear despite the hardship evident in every other aspect of her appearance. "Because my circumstances don't define me. What I choose to do about them does." In that moment, Maxwell realized this girl possessed something his billions couldn't buy, an unbreakable sense of self-worth that no amount of poverty had managed to erode. But what he was about to discover about her past would change everything. The next day, Maxwell returned with exact change. He bought a bracelet for $5, then sat down on the cold concrete beside Eliza's blanket. The morning air was crisp, carrying the scent of nearby food carts and the perpetual city grime. Around them, the urban symphony played on. Car horns, distant sirens, the shuffle of pedestrians hurrying past without a glance. "Do you mind if I ask how you ended up here?" he asked, rolling the bracelet between his fingers. The craftsmanship was impressive up close. Tight, even knots forming a pattern that showed both patience and artistic skill. Eliza's hands never stopped working, weaving colorful threads as she spoke. Her fingers moved with practiced precision, muscle memory guiding each twist and pull. "My mom died when I was 14. Cancer. We didn't have insurance." She tied off a knot with a sharp tug. "My stepdad." She paused, her fingers momentarily still, a shadow crossing her face. "Let's just say it wasn't safe to stay. He changed after she died. The drinking got worse, then the anger." She didn't elaborate further, but the slight tremble in her hands told Maxwell enough. "I've been on my own for almost 3 years now." "What about school?" Maxwell asked, watching as she resumed her weaving, the rhythm seeming to calm her. A ghost of a smile crossed her face, lighting up features that seemed older than her years. "I go to the public library every day. They have free internet and heating in the winter. The librarian, Ms. Patel, sometimes saves me a muffin from their staff meetings." Her voice softened with obvious affection. "I've been taking online courses through Khan Academy and Coursera. I'm particularly good at math and computer science. The librarians let me use their address for my GED paperwork." Maxwell studied her with growing amazement, noticing details he'd missed before. The worn but meticulously clean clothes, the small notebook peeking out from her backpack, with what looked like programming code scribbled on the visible page, the determination in the set of her shoulders. "You're getting your GED while homeless?" "Just because I don't have a home doesn't mean I don't have a future," she replied simply, glancing up to meet his gaze directly. "I sleep at the youth shelter when there's space, wash up in public restrooms, and keep moving forward. What else is there to do? Give up?" A woman walking by slowed down, eyeing Maxwell's expensive watch and shoes with curiosity, clearly wondering what someone like him was doing sitting on the sidewalk with a homeless teen. He ignored the stare, too captivated by Eliza's story. "Where do you keep your supplies?" he asked, gesturing to the colorful threads and beads organized neatly beside her. "I rent a small locker at the bus station, $5 a week." She gave a wry smile. "It's my business expense." Maxwell Reid had built his fortune by recognizing potential where others saw nothing. His tech company, Horizon Innovations, had revolutionized renewable energy because he'd invested in ideas everyone else had dismissed as impractical or too ambitious. Now, looking at this girl with her unwavering determination, he recognized something familiar. Raw potential being wasted by circumstance. A brilliant mind forced to focus on daily survival rather than creation and innovation. "How many of those do you sell on a good day?" he asked, nodding toward the bracelets. "Maybe 6 or 7, 10 on a really good day." She shrugged. "It's enough for food and my locker. I save what I can for emergencies." Maxwell did the quick mental math. Barely enough to survive, certainly not enough to escape her situation. Yet she refused handouts that might have made her life easier. "I have a proposition for you," Maxwell said carefully, choosing his words with the same precision he used in boardroom negotiations. "Not charity, an investment." Eliza's hands stilled, the half-finished bracelet dangling from her fingers. Her expression shifted from open to guarded in an instant. "I'm listening." "I'll provide housing, education, whatever you need to get on your feet. A stable environment where you can focus on your potential rather than survival. In return, you'll work for one of my foundations. Fair wage, real responsibilities, Actual experience you can put on a resume. He paused, watching her reaction closely. When you succeed, not if, when, you'll help me identify others like you for the same opportunity. People with your drive, your refusal to be defined by circumstances, your integrity. Eliza's eyes narrowed with suspicion, scanning his face for any sign of deception or hidden motives. The wariness in her expression spoke volumes about what life had taught her about offers that seemed too good to be true. "Why would you do that?" she asked, her voice cool and analytical. "What's in it for you?" Nobody just hands out opportunities without expecting something in return. A businessman passing by bumped Maxwell's shoulder without stopping or apologizing. The billionaire barely noticed, focused entirely on the conversation at hand. "Two reasons," Maxwell said, holding up one finger. "First, practical business sense. I recognize untapped talent when I see it. Your determination, intelligence, and work ethic are rare qualities. I'd be a fool not to invest in that potential." He raised a second finger. "And second, you've shown me something I've been missing in my philanthropy. For years, I've donated millions to charities and programs, but I've never been satisfied with the results. Real change doesn't come from handouts or impersonal systems. It comes from investing in people who refuse to be defined by their circumstances. People exactly like you." He watched as Eliza processed his words, her skepticism battling with what might have been the first flicker of hope he'd seen in her eyes. "My foundation has apartments for visiting scholars and interns," he continued. "One could be yours. You'd have access to tutors, technology, whatever you need to finish your education. In return, you'd work 20 hours a week, helping us develop a program to identify and support other young people with your kind of potential." Maxwell stood up, brushing off his expensive pants. The contrast between his tailored suit and the gritty sidewalk couldn't have been starker. "I'm not offering charity, Eliza. I'm offering opportunity, the same thing I would offer any promising talent. The difference is, most people in my world have had dozens of opportunities already. You haven't had any." He extended his hand. "So, do we have a deal?" Eliza stared at his outstretched hand for what felt like an eternity. Around them, the city continued its relentless pace. People rushing by, a street performer setting up nearby, the afternoon sun casting long shadows between buildings. In this bubble of stillness amid the chaos, something significant hung in the balance. "I'll need everything in writing," she finally said, reaching up to shake his hand. Her grip was surprisingly firm. "And I want to review it with a lawyer." Maxwell laughed, a genuine, surprised sound that echoed off the surrounding buildings. "Of course you do." "I'm serious," she said, not sharing his amusement. "I've seen what happens when people don't read the fine print." "I would expect nothing less," Maxwell replied, his respect for her growing by the minute. "In fact, I'll arrange for you to meet with my personal attorney, and an independent one of your choosing. This only works if you trust the process." As they finalized the details, neither of them could have predicted how this unlikely partnership would not only transform Eliza's life, but eventually impact thousands of others across the country. What began as a chance encounter on a forgotten street corner would grow into one of the most innovative social initiatives of the decade, challenging conventional wisdom about homelessness, opportunity, and human potential. And it all started because a billionaire took a wrong turn, and a homeless girl refused to beg. Eliza stood in the doorway of the apartment, her entire life's possessions contained in a single weathered backpack slung over her shoulder. The space before her seemed impossibly vast. A one-bedroom unit with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city, modern furniture, and spotless surfaces that gleamed in the afternoon light. The contrast between this pristine environment and the gritty underpass where she'd slept just 2 nights ago was so stark it felt almost hallucinatory. "This is all mine?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. She hesitated to step fully inside, as though crossing the threshold might break whatever spell had created this moment. Sandra Chen, Maxwell's chief of staff, nodded with a warm smile. Her crisp blazer and practical bob haircut gave her an air of efficient professionalism, but her eyes held genuine kindness. "For as long as you're in the program. The kitchen is fully stocked, there's a laptop on the desk, and the closet has some basics to get you started. Nothing fancy, just essentials." Eliza stepped inside cautiously, her worn sneakers silent against the polished hardwood floors. 3 years of sleeping in shelters, under bridges, and in abandoned buildings had trained her to be wary of comfort. It was always temporary, always conditional, always with strings attached that revealed themselves at the worst possible moment. "The security code for the building is on this card," Sandra continued, placing a small envelope on the kitchen counter. "Your key fob works for both the main entrance and the elevator. The building has 24-hour security, and there's a gym on the second floor you're welcome to use." She paused, watching as Eliza moved through the space like a cautious animal exploring unfamiliar territory. "Are you all right?" Eliza nodded, though her eyes continued to dart around the apartment, cataloging exits, hiding spots, and potential weapons, habits formed by necessity that wouldn't disappear overnight. "It's just big," she managed. "The contract is on the counter," Sandra continued, gesturing to a thick folder. "As you requested, we've arranged for you to meet with both our legal team and an independent attorney tomorrow morning at 10. The independent counsel's fees have been covered by a third-party foundation grant, so they're working exclusively in your interest. Nothing needs to be signed until you're comfortable with the terms." Eliza ran her fingers along the smooth countertop, the sensation almost foreign after so long without such simple luxuries. "And what happens tonight if I don't sign?" Sandra's expression didn't waver. "This space is yours tonight regardless. Maxwell was very clear. You need time to make an informed decision without pressure. If you decide this program isn't right for you, we'll provide transitional support to help you find alternative arrangements." She reached into her bag and pulled out a smartphone. "This is for you as well. It's prepaid for a year. My number and Maxwell's assistant are both programmed in. If you need anything, questions, concerns, even if something in the apartment isn't working right, call any time." Eliza took the phone gingerly, as though it might shatter in her hands. "I haven't had a phone since your mother passed," Sandra finished gently. "It's in your intake notes. We know there's a learning curve, but the phone has some tutorials preloaded." She moved toward the door. "I'll leave you to settle in. The refrigerator is stocked with basics. There's a list of nearby delivery options in the kitchen drawer if you'd prefer something else." After Sandra left, Eliza stood alone in the silent apartment. The quiet was disorienting after years of constant urban background noise, traffic, arguments, sirens, the perpetual hum of a city that never truly slept. Here, 14 floors up, the world below seemed distant and muffled, like watching a movie with the sound turned low. She moved through each room methodically, checking locks, examining escape routes, testing windows, habits ingrained by necessity. The bathroom was larger than some shelters she'd stayed in, with fluffy towels stacked neatly and an array of toiletries arranged on the counter. The shower had actual water pressure and unlimited hot water, a luxury she hadn't experienced since before her mother's illness. In the bathroom, she caught her reflection in the full-length mirror and barely recognized herself. The girl staring back looked small, suspicious, and out of place against the elegant backdrop. Her clothes, the cleanest ones she owned, washed in a gas station bathroom the day before, hung loosely on her thin frame. Her hair, which she typically kept pulled back in a practical ponytail, looked dull under the bright bathroom lights. Impulsively, she turned on the shower, adjusting the temperature until steam began to fill the room. She hesitated only briefly before stripping off her clothes and stepping under the hot spray. The sensation was so overwhelming, she had to brace herself against the tile wall, tears mixing with the water streaming down her face. For nearly half an hour, she stood there, letting the heat penetrate muscles that had been tense for years. Afterward, wrapped in a towel larger than any she'd used before, she explored the closet where Sandra had mentioned basics were stored. Inside, she found several sets of new clothing: jeans, t-shirts, sweaters, even a few business casual options, all in approximately her size. Tags still attached. On the floor were 2 pairs of shoes, simple sneakers and flat dress shoes. Nothing flashy or expensive looking, but everything clean, new, and practical. Eliza ran her fingers over the soft fabric of a dark blue sweater, then closed the closet door without taking anything out. Instead, she put her old clothes back on, the familiar sensation of the worn fabric somehow reassuring amid so much newness. In the kitchen, she examined the refrigerator's contents: fresh vegetables, dairy products, prepared meals in stackable containers. The freezer held additional meals, clearly labeled with heating instructions. The cupboards contained staples: rice, pasta, canned goods, spices, along with dishes and cookware that looked unused. On the counter beside the contract folder sat a welcome basket with fruit, crackers, chocolate, and a reusable water bottle with the Horizon Foundation logo. Eliza took an apple, rubbing it against her shirt before taking a cautious bite. The crisp sweetness was so intense, compared to the often bruised discards she typically scavenged, that she closed her eyes involuntarily. As darkness fell outside the floor-to-ceiling windows, the city below transformed into a tapestry of lights. Eliza found herself standing at the glass, watching the patterns of traffic and illuminated buildings, seeing the urban landscape from a perspective she'd never experienced, from above rather than within. Despite her exhaustion, sleep felt dangerous in such an unfamiliar environment. She checked the locks again, then examined the laptop on the desk, running her fingers over the smooth surface without opening it. The bed in the bedroom looked impossibly comfortable, with a plush comforter and multiple pillows arranged invitingly. That night, despite the comfortable bed waiting in the bedroom, Eliza slept on the floor beside the couch, her backpack serving as a pillow. Some adaptations would take longer than others. She kept the bathroom light on, the door cracked just enough to provide a reassuring glow. Even so, she woke repeatedly, disoriented by the silence and the softness of the carpet beneath her. The following week was a blur of meetings, medical appointments, and orientations. True to his word, Maxwell had arranged for comprehensive support, not just housing, but healthcare, educational assessments, and professional clothing. Each service was presented not as charity, but as practical investment, always with clear expectations for Eliza's participation and eventual contribution. Her first medical exam in years revealed several issues requiring attention: vitamin deficiencies, an untreated respiratory infection, dental problems from years without care. The doctor, a woman with kind eyes and a no-nonsense manner, treated her with the same professional courtesy she would any patient, explaining each finding and treatment option without judgment or pity. Your body has been in survival mode for a long time, the doctor explained as she reviewed Eliza's blood work results. Now we need to help it transition to thriving instead of just surviving. That takes time and consistency. The educational assessment was equally revealing. Despite her years away from formal schooling, Eliza's self-directed learning had kept her knowledge in many subjects at or above grade level. Her mathematical abilities tested particularly high, and her reading comprehension was exceptional. The gaps in her education were significant but specific. Areas where self-teaching had limitations or where resources hadn't been available. Your academic potential is extraordinary, the education coordinator told her, reviewing the results. With targeted support to fill these gaps, there's no reason you couldn't excel in a college environment. Your GED should be attainable within months rather than years. Each interaction reinforced the same message. Her current circumstances were temporary. Her potential was the constant. It was a perspective so at odds with how the world had treated her for the past 3 years that Eliza struggled to internalize it, even as she participated in the program's requirements. The foundation offices occupied the 14th floor of Horizon Innovation's downtown headquarters, a gleaming tower of steel and glass that Eliza had passed countless times during her years on the streets, never imagining she would one day walk through its revolving doors as anything other than a trespasser being escorted out by security. On her first official workday, Eliza sat across from Maxwell in a glass-walled conference room, dressed in new clothes that still felt stiff and unfamiliar against her skin. Her hair was pulled back neatly, and the shoes on her feet, while simple, were the first new ones she'd worn in years. Despite Sandra's patient guidance on professional attire and behavior, Eliza couldn't shake the feeling that everyone who saw her knew she didn't belong. Maxwell, by contrast, seemed perfectly at ease, dressed in what she now recognized as his standard uniform. Tailored pants, a button-down shirt with rolled sleeves, no tie, and shoes that probably cost more than most people's monthly rent. He had a way of focusing his attention that made whoever he was speaking to feel like the most important person in the room. A quality Eliza found both reassuring and slightly unnerving. "How are you settling in?" he asked, placing a tablet on the table between them. Eliza considered deflecting with a simple, "Fine." But something about his direct gaze encouraged honesty. "It's adjustment. The apartment feels too quiet. Too empty." She hesitated. "Too safe, if that makes sense." Maxwell nodded. "The absence of constant threat can be its own kind of stress. Your nervous system has been calibrated for danger for so long that safety feels wrong. That will recalibrate with time." "You sound like the therapist they're making me see," Eliza observed, a hint of challenge in her voice. "Dr. Winters? She's excellent. I've worked with her on veteran transition programs." He smiled slightly. "And yes, I've been in therapy myself. Running a company like Horizon comes with its own psychological challenges." The casual admission surprised her. In her experience, powerful people rarely acknowledged vulnerability or seeking help. "I've been thinking about your proposal," she said, changing the subject and placing a folder on the table between them. "About identifying and supporting others like me." Maxwell raised an eyebrow. "And?" "It's flawed," she said, bluntly. "You're looking for people who remind you of me. People who refuse handouts and maintain dignity despite everything. But that's a privileged perspective. Most people in positions of power, Eliza had learned, responded to criticism with defensiveness or dismissal. Maxwell, however, leaned forward, intrigued rather than offended. "Explain." "I was lucky," Eliza continued, opening the folder to reveal handwritten notes and diagrams she'd worked on late into the night. I had 3 years of good education before my mom got sick. I had a library card and librarians who looked out for me. I didn't have addiction issues or untreated mental health problems. I'm not supporting children or elderly parents. She pushed the folder toward him. For every person like me, there are 20 others with just as much potential who've been beaten down so many times they've stopped fighting back. Your model would miss them completely. She tapped a page covered with statistics she'd researched on the laptop. The average homeless person has experienced trauma before becoming homeless, and then accumulates more trauma while living on the streets. Many self-medicate with whatever they can access. Many have untreated mental health conditions that make traditional programs inaccessible to them. Your current criteria would filter most of them out before they ever got a chance. For a moment, Maxwell was silent, studying the detailed analysis she'd prepared. Then a slow smile spread across his face. "This is exactly why I wanted you here," he said. "You see blind spots I don't even know I have." He tapped the folder. "So what do you propose instead?" "A tiered approach," Eliza replied, her confidence growing as she outlined her vision. Different entry points based on where people are in their journey, not just where they should be. Some will need addiction services or mental health support before they can even think about education or employment. Others might need family reunification or legal assistance. She flipped to a diagram showing interconnected services and pathways. The current system forces people to be housing ready or employment ready before they can access help. But how do you get ready for housing when you don't have housing? It's a catch-22 that keeps people trapped. As she spoke, Maxwell watched her transform before his eyes. The guarded, suspicious girl from the street corner was still there, but now her natural intelligence and leadership qualities were beginning to emerge. Her hands moved animatedly as she explained concepts, her voice growing stronger with each point. "You're not just describing a program," he said when she finished. "You're describing an entirely new approach to addressing homelessness." Eliza nodded, a flush of pride coloring her cheeks. "Because the current system is designed to manage homelessness, not end it. And it certainly doesn't recognize the wasted potential of people living on the streets." Maxwell stood and walked to the window, looking out at the city sprawled below. "Do you know why I built Horizon Innovations?" he asked. "To make money?" Eliza suggested, a hint of her street-hardened cynicism showing through. He laughed, the sound bouncing off the glass walls. "That was a pleasant side effect. No, I built it because everyone told me renewable energy couldn't scale efficiently. The established wisdom was that we needed to manage our dependence on fossil fuels, not end it." He turned back to face her. "I don't accept managing problems when solving them is possible. It seems you don't either." That afternoon, Maxwell introduced Eliza to the Foundation's board of directors, not as a charity case or program participant, but as a strategic consultant with unique expertise. The skepticism in some of their expressions was evident, particularly from older board members who exchanged glances when Maxwell outlined her role in developing the new initiative. "Ms. Winters will be working directly with our program development team," Maxwell explained, using the surname Eliza had chosen for herself when completing her paperwork. Her birth certificate had her stepfather's last name, a connection she'd been determined to sever. Her first-hand experience with homelessness, combined with her analytical abilities, gives her insights none of us can claim. One board member, a silver-haired woman with an expensive haircut and a doubtful expression, leaned forward. "While I appreciate the unique perspective, Mr. Reid, I'm concerned about placing so much responsibility on someone so young and, forgive me, inexperienced in program development and nonprofit management. Before Maxwell could respond, Eliza met the woman's gaze directly. "You're right that I don't have formal training in nonprofit management," she said calmly. "What I do have is expertise in how existing programs fail the people they're meant to serve. I've watched people cycle through systems designed by well-intentioned people who've never experienced a single day of homelessness." She paused. "If you want different results, you need different approaches. That requires voices that haven't been at the table before." The room fell silent. Maxwell's smile was barely concealed as the board member blinked in surprise. "Well said," the woman finally replied, her expression shifting from doubt to thoughtful consideration. "I look forward to seeing your proposals." As weeks turned into months, Eliza's program, eventually named Horizon Pathways, began to take shape. She divided her time between her GD studies, coding classes, and developing the initiative that would eventually become her legacy. The apartment gradually began to feel like home as she allowed herself small personalizations. A plant on the windowsill, a colorful throw blanket, books that belonged to her alone. The first time she bought something purely decorative, a small ceramic figurine of a fox from a street vendor. She stared at it for nearly an hour after placing it on her shelf, conflicted about spending money on something with no practical purpose. But each small addition helped transform the space from a temporary shelter to something that felt increasingly her own. She learned to cook in the well-appointed kitchen, starting with simple recipes and gradually experimenting with techniques and flavors. The first time she invited Sandra over for dinner, a homemade pasta dish that had taken 3 attempts to get right felt like crossing an invisible boundary between surviving and living. But the transition wasn't without challenges. Nightmares frequently disrupted her sleep, phantom sensations of concrete beneath her back, jolting her awake in the darkness. In crowded rooms, she still instinctively tracked exits and kept her back to walls. And despite the security of her new situation, she continued to save every penny possible, maintaining a secret emergency fund hidden in her apartment, preparing for a future that might still snatch everything away. There were moments of overwhelming sensory overload. The constant hum of the heating system, the brightness of office lighting, the cacophony of voices in meeting rooms, that sometimes sent her retreating to quiet corners or bathroom stalls, practicing the breathing techniques Dr. Winters had taught her until the panic subsided. The most difficult adjustment, however, was learning to trust. Years on the streets had taught Eliza that vulnerability was dangerous, that people's motivations were rarely what they claimed, that kindness usually came with hidden costs. Even as she excelled in her work and studies, a part of her remained vigilant, waiting for the other shoe to drop, for the real agenda to reveal itself. That vigilance was tested 6 months into the program, when Maxwell invited her to dinner at his home to celebrate her passing the GED with perfect scores. An achievement that had required intensive study, but had ultimately validated the self-education she'd pursued during her years of homelessness. As his driver navigated the winding road up to the hillside mansion, Eliza felt her anxiety mounting. The car itself, a luxury electric vehicle with butter-soft leather seats and climate control that could be adjusted to the 10th of a degree, was intimidating enough. The prospect of entering Maxwell's private domain, away from the professional environment of the Foundation offices, triggered all her old warning systems. "You seem nervous," Maxwell observed as they pulled through the security gates, passing manicured gardens illuminated by subtle landscape lighting. "I've never been to a place like this," she admitted, staring up at the modernist structure of glass and steel perched on the hillside. The building seemed to emerge organically from the landscape, its angular lines softened by living walls of vegetation and expansive terraces. Few people have, he replied. But that's not what's bothering you. Eliza hesitated, then decided on honesty. I keep waiting for you to reveal what you really want from me. Nobody does all this. She gestured vaguely, encompassing not just the mansion, but the entire program, her apartment, her future, without expecting something in return. The car came to a stop in the circular driveway. Maxwell turned to face her, his expression serious. You're right, he said. I do want something from you, Eliza. I want to see what happens when someone with your intelligence, determination, and perspective is given the resources to reach their full potential. I want to learn from your insights because they come from experiences I'll never have. And yes, I want to use what we create together to help others. He smiled slightly. Is that exploitative? Perhaps, but I think it's a fair exchange. As they walked toward the house, Eliza considered his words. The truth was, she had benefited enormously from this arrangement. Not just materially, but in the opportunity to channel her intelligence and experiences into meaningful work. For the first time in years, she was building something rather than simply surviving. Inside, she was surprised to find not an elaborate dinner party, but a casual gathering of the foundation team she'd been working with. Sandra was there with her wife, as were the education coordinator, the legal counsel who'd reviewed her contract, and several others who had supported her transition. The dining room opened onto a terrace with breathtaking views of the city below. The same city where she'd once fought for survival, one day at a time. I thought we could celebrate with the people who've been part of your journey, Maxwell explained, leading her into the room. Everyone here has been impressed with your work and your commitment. The table was set simply but elegantly, with food served family style. Platters of roasted vegetables, grilled fish, and fresh bread. There was nothing showy or ostentatious about the gathering, nothing that suggested Maxwell was flaunting his wealth or position. We're all so proud of your GED results, Sandra said, raising a glass in toast. Though none of us were surprised. Your practice test scores were already off the charts. The math section was actually challenging, Eliza admitted, still uncomfortable with direct praise. I had to relearn some algebraic concepts I'd forgotten. And yet you scored in the 99th percentile, the education coordinator added. With scores like that, we should be discussing college applications. Many universities would offer significant scholarships based on these results. The conversation turned to educational possibilities. Community college pathways, online programs that would allow her to continue her work with the foundation, specific fields of study that aligned with her interests and abilities. Throughout the meal, Eliza found herself gradually relaxing. The conversation flowed naturally between work topics and personal stories. These people, she realized, had become more than colleagues. They were becoming something like friends. After dinner, Maxwell led her to his home office to show her something. Unlike the rest of the house, which balanced minimalism with warmth, his office was clearly a working space. Multiple monitors displaying data streams, walls covered with whiteboards filled with equations and diagrams, bookshelves overflowing with technical manuals and biographies. On his desk sat a framed object, the blue and white bracelet he'd purchased from her that first day. I keep this here to remind me of what's possible, he said. Not just what you've accomplished, but what it represents. How a chance encounter can change everything if we're paying attention. Eliza stared at the simple bracelet, now displayed like a precious artifact. I made that one with thread I found in a donation bin, she admitted. The blue was from an old sweater I unraveled. And now you're helping design a program that could change thousands of lives, Maxwell said. That's the journey I wanted to celebrate tonight. He moved to a whiteboard and erased a section, then picked up a marker. "Tell me more about the multi-tiered entry system you've been developing. Sandra mentioned you've been refining the assessment protocols." For the next hour, they worked together at the whiteboard, Eliza explaining her latest refinements to the program model, while Maxwell asked questions that pushed her thinking in new directions. There was no power dynamic in these moments. Just two minds engaged in solving a complex problem together. When they rejoined the others for dessert on the terrace, Eliza felt something shift inside her. Not a complete dissolution of her wariness, but perhaps the first real crack in the armor she'd built around herself. The path forward was still uncertain, the work challenging, and trust remained a daily choice rather than an instinct. But for the first time since her mother died, Eliza allowed herself to consider a future not just of survival, but of possibility. As the evening ended and the driver prepared to take her back to her apartment, Sandra handed her a small gift bag. "Just a little something to commemorate your achievement," she said. Inside was a journal bound in soft leather, with Eliza's initials embossed on the cover. Tucked inside the front cover was a handwritten note from the entire team, each person adding their own message of congratulation and encouragement. The gesture was so unexpected, so personal, that Eliza found herself blinking back tears as she thanked them. The weight of the journal in her hands felt significant, a tangible reminder that her thoughts and ideas were valued, that her future was worth documenting. Later that night, back in her apartment, Eliza opened the journal and wrote her first entry. 6 months ago, I was making bracelets on a street corner, just trying to survive another day. Now I'm designing programs that might help others escape what I lived through. I still don't fully trust this new reality. I still sleep with one eye open. But today, for the first time, I allowed myself to imagine a future where I might actually thrive, not just survive. Where I might build something lasting, where I might belong somewhere. I'm not naive. This could all disappear tomorrow. But even if it does, I'm not the same person I was 6 months ago. Whatever happens next, I'll face it stronger than before. What neither she nor Maxwell could foresee was how the next phase of their work together would soon attract national attention, and with it, forces that would threaten everything they were building. As Horizon Pathways prepared for its pilot launch, powerful interests with stakes in the status quo were beginning to take notice of the unconventional program and its even more unconventional creator. But for tonight, in the safety of her apartment, Eliza allowed herself a moment of quiet pride in how far she had come. She placed the journal on her nightstand and, for the first time since moving in, fell asleep in the bed rather than on the floor beside it. A small but significant step in her ongoing transition from surviving to living. 9 months into the program, Horizon Pathways was ready for its pilot launch. What had begun as a theoretical model in Eliza's notes had evolved into a comprehensive initiative with multiple entry points, tailored support systems, and innovative metrics for success. Traditional programs measure success by how many people they process. Eliza explained to a room of potential funders. We measure success by sustainable transformation, not just housing secured, but housing maintained, not just jobs found, but careers built. At 20, she had developed a commanding presence that belied her youth. Dressed in a simple blazer and jeans, her hair now styled in a practical bob, she moved through the presentation with confidence, fielding complex questions without hesitation. The pilot will focus on 3 distinct populations, she continued, gesturing to the slides Maxwell's team had prepared. Young adults aging out of foster care, veterans struggling with reintegration, and families experiencing first-time homelessness. Each group requires different approaches, but the core principle remains the same. We meet people where they are, not where we wish they were. The presentation was a success. By the end of the day, Horizon Pathways had secured commitments for twice its initial funding goal. What had started as Maxwell's personal project now had institutional backing from major foundations and private donors, impressed by both the model's innovation and its chief architect's lived experience. "You were remarkable in there," Maxwell told her afterward as they reviewed the funding pledges. "You've come so far from that street corner." Eliza allowed herself a small smile. "The girl from the street corner is still here," she said. "She's just wearing better clothes now." The pilot program launched on a Tuesday in October. 3 locations across the city would serve as intake centers, each designed to feel welcoming rather than institutional. Eliza had insisted on comfortable furniture, natural light, and private meeting spaces where people could share their stories without fear of being overheard. "The environment communicates our expectations," she had argued during the design phase. "Sterile, prison-like spaces tell people we expect them to behave like inmates. Dignified spaces communicate that we see them as people worthy of respect." On launch day, Eliza visited all 3 centers, observing the intake process and making real-time adjustments. By afternoon, 27 people had entered the program, each assigned a personal advocate and a customized pathway based on their specific needs and goals. The media coverage was immediate and largely positive. Local news outlets ran features on the revolutionary approach to homelessness and the street-smart program designer behind it. Maxwell's PR team carefully managed Eliza's public exposure, mindful of her privacy while showcasing her expertise. But with visibility came scrutiny. 3 weeks after the launch, Eliza was working late at the foundation offices when Sandra appeared in her doorway, looking troubled. "You need to see this," she said, placing her tablet on Eliza's desk. The screen displayed an article from the City Chronicle titled, "Questions Raised About Horizon Pathways Leadership." The piece questioned Eliza's qualifications, citing anonymous sources, who suggested her role was exaggerated for publicity purposes and that her background story had been embellished to attract funding. "They're calling me a fraud," Eliza said flatly, scrolling through the article. Sandra nodded grimly. "Maxwell is already on it. The legal team is preparing a response." "Who would do this?" Eliza asked, though part of her had been waiting for something like this all along, the other shoe finally dropping confirmation that she didn't truly belong in this world. The answer came 3 days later when Maxwell called an emergency meeting. "We've identified the source of the leak," he said without preamble. "It's Westridge." Eliza frowned. "The shelter network? Why would they undermine us? We're referring people to their services." "Because we're also exposing their inefficiency," Maxwell replied. "Our intake data shows that 64% of our participants previously cycled through Westridge programs without lasting improvement. Their federal funding is up for renewal next quarter, and our metrics make them look bad." The revelation sparked something in Eliza. Not fear or defeat, but a cold, familiar determination. This wasn't so different from territorial disputes on the streets, just with higher stakes and more sophisticated weapons. "So, what do we do?" she asked. Maxwell studied her for a moment. "That depends. We could issue denials, provide documentation of your background, fight this on their terms, or we could change the narrative entirely," Eliza finished. "Make this about the people we're helping, not about me." A slow smile spread across Maxwell's face. "Exactly what I was thinking." The counter-strategy unfolded over the next week. Instead of defending Eliza's credentials, Horizon Pathways released detailed, anonymized case studies of early program successes. A veteran who had secured both housing and employment after years of chronic homelessness. A young mother who had reunited with her children while completing vocational training. A former foster youth now enrolled in community college with stable housing for the first time. Eliza herself proposed the most daring element of the response: a public forum where program participants could share their experiences directly with community leaders and media. No scripted testimonials, no foundation representatives filtering their words. It's risky, Maxwell cautioned. They might criticize aspects of the program. Good, Eliza replied. Then we'll know what needs fixing. Authentic feedback is more valuable than perfect PR. The forum, held at the downtown public library, drew a capacity crowd. One by one, participants took the microphone. Some nervous, some angry, all deeply authentic as they described their journeys and how Horizon Pathways differed from other programs they'd encountered. A middle-aged man with weathered features spoke about the dignity of having choices rather than mandates. A young woman described how her advocate had helped her navigate the complex legal system to resolve outstanding warrants that had prevented her from applying for jobs. An elderly veteran explained how the program had been the first to address his housing, health, and emotional needs simultaneously, rather than sending him to separate, uncoordinated services. When asked directly about Eliza, their responses were varied but uniformly supportive. "She actually listens," one woman said simply. "She doesn't just pretend to understand, she does understand, because she's been there." From the back of the room, Eliza watched, fighting tears. For so long, she had existed in survival mode, focused solely on her own needs. Now, hearing how her work was affecting others, something fundamental shifted inside her. This wasn't just about proving her worth or justifying Maxwell's investment anymore. It was about creating the support system she had needed during her own darkest days. The forum's impact was immediate. The Chronicle published a follow-up piece titled, "Horizon Pathways Participants Speak Out. This Program Works." Westridge's attempt to discredit Eliza backfired as public attention focused on program outcomes rather than personnel credentials. But the victory came with a personal cost. The increased scrutiny had forced Eliza to revisit the most painful chapters of her past, including details she had carefully compartmentalized. Dr. Winters noticed the toll during their weekly session. "You're having nightmares again," she observed. Eliza nodded reluctantly. "The same one. I'm back on the street and everything, the program, the apartment, all of it, was just a dream." "That's a common fear among people who've experienced housing insecurity," Dr. Winters said. "The fear that stability is temporary, that you could lose everything again at any moment." "It's not just fear," Eliza replied. "It's certainty. I know how quickly everything can disappear." She stared out the office window at the city skyline. "My mother was a nurse. We had insurance, savings, a 3-bedroom house. Then she got sick. The insurance denied coverage. The savings ran out. And suddenly we were living in a motel, then a car, then nowhere at all." It was the most she had ever revealed about her past, even after months of therapy. Dr. Winters simply listened, allowing her the space to continue. "Everyone's so impressed with how I survived on the streets," Eliza said bitterly. "No one talks about how wrong it is that I had to. How the system failed us long before I ended up on that corner selling bracelets." "And that's what drives you," Dr. Winters suggested gently. "Not just helping people survive homelessness, but addressing why it happens in the first place." Eliza nodded. "Which is why I can't let Westridge or anyone else derail this program. It's not perfect, but it's addressing the real problems, not just the symptoms. As she left the session, Eliza found Maxwell waiting in the reception area. His presence outside her therapy appointment was unprecedented and immediately put her on alert. "What's wrong?" she asked. "Nothing's wrong," he assured her. "But something important has come up. The mayor's office called. They want to meet with us tomorrow about potentially scaling Horizon Pathways citywide." Eliza blinked in surprise. "That's fast. We've only been operational for 6 weeks." "The forum created momentum," Maxwell explained. "And the preliminary data is compelling. Our retention rate is 94% compared to the city average of 37% for comparable programs. We need more time to refine the model," Eliza protested. "There are still elements we're troubleshooting." Maxwell studied her with a curious expression. "Most people would be celebrating this opportunity. It's validation of your approach on the largest possible scale." "It's also a risk," she countered. "If we scale too quickly and fail, it won't just be my reputation or the foundation's at stake. It will affect people's willingness to try innovative approaches in the future." She met his gaze directly. "I'm not saying no. I'm saying we need to be strategic about how we grow." A slow smile spread across Maxwell's face. "And that," he said, "is exactly why you're the right person to lead this initiative. You understand what's truly at stake." He gestured toward the elevator. "Let's go back to the office and prepare for tomorrow. If we're going to do this, we'll do it right." As they rode down in the elevator, Eliza realized something significant had just occurred. For the first time, Maxwell had explicitly acknowledged her leadership role. Not as a consultant or advisor, but as the driving force behind Horizon Pathways. More importantly, she had pushed back against premature expansion, not from fear or insecurity, but from genuine concern for the program's integrity and long-term impact. The girl from the street corner wasn't just wearing better clothes now. She was growing into a leader who could shape systems rather than simply navigate them. What neither of them could anticipate was how their meeting with the mayor would set in motion events that would test not just the program, but their partnership, and force Eliza to confront parts of her past she had long tried to forget. As Horizon Pathways stood on the brink of transformative expansion, forces were aligning that would challenge everything Eliza had built and believed about herself. The mayor's office occupied the top floor of City Hall. Its windows offering panoramic views of the urban landscape Eliza had once navigated as a homeless teenager. Now, dressed in a tailored pantsuit, her first, purchased specifically for this meeting, she sat beside Maxwell at a polished conference table, presenting data slides to the mayor and her executive team. "The key innovation of Horizon Pathways isn't just what we offer, but how we offer it," Eliza explained, her voice steady despite her racing heart. "Traditional programs operate on a deficiency model. They focus on what people lack. We operate on an agency model. We focus on building decision-making power and self-determination." Mayor Gloria Chen, a pragmatic former prosecutor with mayoral ambitions, studied the presentation with sharp eyes. "Your retention numbers are impressive," she acknowledged. "But scaling citywide would require integration with existing services, many of which operate on the very model you're critiquing. That's precisely why phased implementation is crucial," Eliza responded. "We're proposing a 3-year rollout, beginning with 2 additional districts before expanding further. This allows us to build partnerships, train personnel in our methodology, and refine our approach based on expanded data." The meeting lasted 2 hours, diving into budgets, metrics, and implementation challenges. Throughout, Eliza found herself drawing on everything she'd learned, From Maxwell's business acumen to Sandra's policy expertise to her own lived experience navigating fragmented services. When the mayor finally leaned back in her chair, her decision was unexpected. "I'm not interested in your 3-year plan," she said bluntly. Maxwell tensed beside Eliza, but before he could respond, the mayor continued. "I want to implement this citywide within 12 months. The homelessness crisis is costing us federal funding, tourism dollars, and most importantly, human potential. Your approach is the first I've seen that addresses root causes rather than symptoms." She turned to her chief of staff. "Draft a proposal for emergency funding allocation. I want a formal announcement by the end of the month." Outside City Hall, Maxwell was jubilant. "This is everything we hoped for and more," he said as they walked toward the waiting car. "Full municipal backing, expedited funding, political support at the highest level." But Eliza's expression remained troubled. "It's too fast," she said. "We need time to build infrastructure, train advocates, establish partnerships. Rushing implementation could undermine everything we've built." Maxwell studied her for a moment. "You're right," he conceded. "But this is the opportunity we have. The political will might not align again like this." He placed a hand on her shoulder. "If anyone can make this work on an accelerated timeline, it's you." His confidence was both reassuring and terrifying. As the car pulled away from City Hall, Eliza stared out at the streets she once called home, wondering if she was about to help transform them or set up a spectacular public failure. The next 3 months passed in a blur of 18-hour days, endless meetings, and rapid-fire decisions. Horizon Pathways transitioned from a foundation initiative to a public-private partnership with dedicated city funding and a mandate to revolutionize homeless services across all districts. Eliza's team expanded from 8 to 40, then to over 100. She insisted on hiring people with lived experience of homelessness at every level of the organization, creating a leadership structure that balanced professional expertise with first-hand knowledge. "Your background check system is rejecting qualified candidates," she told the city's HR director during a particularly tense meeting. "People who've experienced homelessness often have minor legal infractions, loitering citations, trespassing charges for sleeping in abandoned buildings, outstanding fines they couldn't pay. If we disqualify everyone with that history, we're excluding the very expertise we need." Her advocacy resulted in revised hiring protocols that distinguished between violent offenses and survival-related infractions. A change that rippled beyond Horizon Pathways to affect city hiring practices more broadly. As the program expanded, Eliza's public profile grew accordingly. Local media dubbed her the architect, highlighting how her personal journey informed the program's innovative approach. National publications began to take notice, with features in major magazines and invitations to speak at conferences. Maxwell encouraged this visibility, understanding its value for continued funding and political support. "Your story humanizes the issue," he explained. "It challenges people's assumptions about homelessness and capability." But the spotlight brought complications. One evening, as Eliza was leaving the office, a reporter approached her in the parking garage. "Ms. Winters, I'm doing a follow-up piece on Horizon Pathways," he said, blocking her path to the elevator. "I've been speaking with your stepfather in Arizona. He has a very different account of why you left home." Eliza froze, her carefully constructed professional demeanor cracking. "My stepfather has no role in my life or this program," she managed, her voice tight. "Please contact our media relations team for any inquiries." But the damage was done. The mention of her stepfather, the man whose escalating abuse had forced her to flee at 14, triggered a cascade of memories she'd worked hard to compartmentalize. That night, the nightmares returned with new intensity, leaving her shaking and disoriented at 3 a.m. Without conscious decision, she found herself calling Maxwell's private number. "I need to disappear for a day," she said when he answered, her voice raw. "There's a reporter digging into my past, contacting my stepfather. I need to regroup." Maxwell's response was immediate and unquestioning. "Take my cabin in the mountains. The address is in your secure file. No one will find you there. I'll have Sandra reschedule tomorrow's meetings." The cabin turned out to be a modernist retreat nestled among pine trees, its floor-to-ceiling windows offering views of distant peaks. Eliza spent the first hours simply sitting on the deck, breathing mountain air and allowing herself to feel the full weight of what was happening. Her past and present were colliding in ways she hadn't anticipated. The program's success had made her visible, and visibility made her vulnerable. The girl who had survived by staying unnoticed now found herself the focus of public attention, including from those she had fled. By evening, she had made a decision. When Maxwell called to check on her, she was ready. "I need to control my narrative," she said without preamble. "If reporters are going to dig into my past, I want to shape how that story's told." "Are you sure?" Maxwell asked. "You've always been private about the details." "I'm sure," she replied. "But I need your help." 2 weeks later, Eliza sat for an in-depth interview with The Atlantic, chronicling her journey from middle-class stability through homelessness to her current role. For the first time, she spoke publicly about her mother's illness, the medical bankruptcy that followed, and her stepfather's descent into alcoholism and abuse. "I left because staying meant accepting that abuse was the price of shelter," she explained, her voice steady despite the difficulty of the subject. Many people face similar, impossible choices between safety and housing, between dignity and survival. Horizon Pathways exists because no one should have to make those choices. The article, titled "From Homeless to Homelessness Innovator," was published with her full cooperation and approval. It was unflinching in its details, but focused primarily on how her experiences had shaped Horizon Pathways' unique approach. The response was overwhelming. Donations to the program doubled within days. Applications from people wanting to join the team flooded in. Most significantly, other cities began reaching out, interested in adopting the model. "You've changed the conversation," Maxwell told her after the article's publication. "You've made people see homelessness as a systemic failure rather than a personal one." Eliza nodded, feeling both exposed and oddly liberated. "Now we need to make sure the program lives up to the story." 6 months after the mayor's decision, Horizon Pathways operated in every district of the city. The data was promising: 70% reduction in returns to homelessness compared to traditional programs, significant improvements in health outcomes and employment stability, and cost savings in emergency services and law enforcement. But success brought new challenges. Established service providers felt threatened by the reallocation of funding. Neighborhood associations resisted the integration of housing sites in their communities. Political opponents of the mayor began questioning the program's rapid expansion and unorthodox methods. The criticism crystallized around a specific case: a program participant named Marcus, who had been housed in an affluent neighborhood and subsequently arrested for drug possession. Conservative media outlets seized on the story as evidence of the program's flawed approach. "This is exactly what we warned about," declared a city council member from a wealthy district. "Bringing people with addiction issues into stable neighborhoods puts our communities at risk." The controversy threatened to undermine public support at a critical juncture. Maxwell's instinct was to distance the program from the incident, emphasizing the overall success rate rather than this single failure. Eliza disagreed. Marcus isn't a failure, she argued during an emergency strategy session. He's exactly why our approach matters. He relapsed because our support services in that district aren't fully implemented yet. The housing came before the wraparound services were in place. The public won't understand those nuances, Maxwell cautioned. They'll just see confirmation of their fears. Then we need to help them understand, Eliza insisted. This isn't about public relations. It's about program integrity. If we abandon our principles at the first sign of trouble, what are we even building here? Their disagreement, the first serious one in their partnership, reflected deeper tensions about the program's direction. Maxwell, ever the pragmatist, worried about political sustainability. Eliza, driven by her lived experience, refused to compromise on the program's core values. The resolution came from an unexpected source. During the debate, Sandra had quietly left the room to make a call. She returned with news that changed the dynamic entirely. I just spoke with Marcus's advocate, she announced. He's agreed to speak publicly about his experience, the good and the bad. He wants to help people understand addiction as a health issue, not a moral failing. Marcus's testimony before the city council was powerful in its honesty. He spoke about his 20 years of homelessness, his multiple attempts at recovery, and how Horizon Pathways differed from other programs he'd encountered. I relapsed, he acknowledged to the packed chamber. But for the first time, that didn't mean losing everything. My advocate didn't give up on me. The program didn't evict me. They intensified support instead of withdrawing it. He looked directly at the council member who had criticized the program. Recovery isn't linear. It's a process with setbacks. The difference with Horizon Pathways is they understand that. They plan for it. The controversy didn't disappear overnight. But Marcus's testimony shifted the narrative. Instead of focusing on the relapse, media coverage began examining how traditional approaches often punish setbacks, rather than treating them as part of the recovery process. For Eliza, the incident reinforced something she had known instinctively, but now saw clearly demonstrated. The program's greatest strength was its willingness to learn and adapt, rather than default to punitive responses. As the one-year mark of citywide implementation approached, Horizon Pathways had achieved what many considered impossible: significant, measurable reduction in homelessness across all districts, with the sustainable outcomes that survived scrutiny from even the most skeptical analysts. The mayor's office planned a major press conference to announce the results and commit to permanent funding. The night before the event, Eliza found herself back on the street corner where Maxwell had first found her. Not by accident, but by deliberate choice. The area had changed. New businesses had opened, the sidewalks were cleaner, and ironically, there were no visible signs of homelessness. The very people she had once lived alongside had been either helped by her program or pushed to less visible locations. As she stood there, a luxury car pulled up beside her. Maxwell stepped out, unsurprised to find her there. "Sandra said you might be here," he explained, joining her on the corner. "Revisiting where it all began?" Eliza nodded. 3 years ago, I was sitting right here just trying to survive another day. Now we're about to announce results that could change how cities across the country address homelessness. She shook her head slightly. It doesn't seem real sometimes. It's real, Maxwell assured her. And it's just the beginning. He hesitated, then continued. The governor called today. She wants to implement Horizon Pathways statewide, with you leading the expansion. Eliza turned to him, stunned. Statewide? That would be hundreds of thousands of people. Exactly. Maxwell's expression was serious. It's an unprecedented opportunity, but it would mean stepping further into the public eye, navigating state politics, building something much larger than what we've created here. The prospect was both exhilarating and terrifying. Statewide implementation would mean reaching rural communities, addressing homelessness in contexts very different from the urban environment she knew intimately. It would mean building systems at a scale she had barely imagined. I need time to think about it, she said finally. Maxwell nodded. Of course, but whatever you decide, remember this. He gestured to the street corner where they stood. You've already proven what's possible. Everything else is just scale. As they walked back to the car, Eliza felt the weight of the decision before her. The girl who had once fought for daily survival now faced choices that could impact thousands of lives. The program she had designed from her own painful experience stood poised to transform systems that had failed her and countless others. Whatever she decided about the governor's offer, one thing was certain. The journey that had begun on this corner with a simple bracelet transaction had taken her further than she had ever imagined possible. And it was far from over. The press conference tomorrow would mark not an ending, but a new beginning. As Eliza slid into the passenger seat beside Maxwell, she allowed herself a moment to acknowledge how far she had come, and how far she still intended to go. What neither of them could anticipate was how their expanding vision would soon collide with national politics, powerful economic interests, and unexpected personal revelations that would test not just their program, but the very partnership that had created it.